Dan the Biggest Dump Truck by Chris Adams. Dan was the biggest dump truck in the whole wide world. He was massive. He was mega big. He was mighty. His tipper could hold 100 elephants in its bed. His wheels were as big as houses, and his horn was louder than thunder. But Dan was lonely. All he wanted was a construction crew to call his very own. One day, Dan went to the skyscraper construction site, and all the workers and all the trucks and all the diggers and all the cranes came over to see him. But when they saw how big he was, they said, "Man, oh man, Dan, you're much too big to work here." So Dan went away and he was sad. Then Dan went to the bridge construction site, and all the workers and all the trucks and all the diggers and all the cranes came over to see him. But when they saw how big he was, they said, "Man, oh man, Dan, you're much too big to work here." So Dan went away and he was sad. Then Dan went to the housing construction site, and all the workers and all the trucks and all the diggers and all the cranes came over to see him. But when they saw how big he was, they said, "Man, oh man, Dan, you're much too big to work here." So Dan went away and he was sad. Then the new sports stadium job came to town, and all the construction vehicles and all the construction workers were needed at this site to do the job. The diggers dug, and the mixers mixed, and the haulers hauled, and the cranes hoisted, and the forklifts lifted, and the bulldozers moved the earth, and the job was going well, until all that digging and mixing and hauling and hoisting and lifting and earth moving made so much dirt and rocks and rubble that all the trucks and vehicles and the workers and equipment were stuck inside the site. They had dug so much that there was no way out. Soon word spread of the crisis. News vans and reporters arrived on the scene. "Breaking news! Construction crews, trucks, and equipment stuck at the site of the new sports stadium. The foreman is asking that anyone that can help get rid of all the dirt come to the site immediately." Dan was driving along, feeling sad, when he heard the news flash on his radio. He stopped, and he said to himself, "I can do this." So Dan started up his massive, mighty mega engine. Brum, brum. And he readied his huge, enormous, gigantic tipper. And he blared his super loud horns. Honk, honk. Dan drove to the job site, shouting out, "Everyone, let me through!" And when he got to the sports stadium, Dan got to work. He told the diggers to fill up his tipper with dirt. He told the workers to shovel in the rocks. He told the cranes to put in all the rubble. So the diggers dug, and the workers shoveled, and the cranes lifted, and all the dirt and all the rocks and all the rubble went into Dan's enormous tipper. Then Dan started up his engines. Brum, brum. He honked his huge horns. Honk, honk. His massive tires gripped the road, and Dan hauled all the dirt away. And when the site was clear, and the workers and equipment were all safe, everyone cheered for Dan. Hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray! The construction crew foreman was so happy that Dan had saved the day and the job that he said, "Dan, You sure make quick work of all that dirt. How'd you like to join our crew and be our #1 dump truck?" And at last, Dan was happy. The end.